This morning, we're joined by Beatrice Annan, legal consultant, and as well a presidential staffer. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you.
Good to see you. You look gorgeous, very stunning.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I think today is my first time of being on your show. Like, a lot of time, so I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy that you're here. Usually a news review would ask what in the news has your attention.
There are two things.
Okay.
The first one, President Mahama saying that a woman will be a president in the future. And of course, the most trending issue, Galamsey. So these, are the two things. And from where I sit and working close to with President Mahama, if anybody is so conscious about women development, if anybody is so conscious about changing the narrative and the optics, I think it's President Mahama. And you can see this demonstrated in two ways. When he wanted a running mate for an election, at a time when many people, including even Nanado, had said that Ghanaian women were not so dynamic. And many people had opposed, the candidature of a female. He stood his ground. In 2020, ran with Professor Jenan Opoku-Agyeman. In 2024, did same. I also keep saying that during the campaign, what many didn't notice was that both spokesperson, Joyce Bauer Esquire and myself were the spokesperson. And it's a very technical thing to be speaking for someone and no meaner person than the president. And so it tells you how confident he is. Even where I sit today as a presidential staffer, President Mahama will say for every board that is being formed, we need women.
Right.
You know, sometimes the boards have representations from different institutions. They will bring men throughout, and then he will say, can you take it back for them to bring? We need some women. So he's very conscious, not just about speaking, but acting it. And he's always quick to mention Farida because he has a daughter and knows that women face a lot of barriers. And the narratives are changing. I'm just overwhelmed with many women saying that we want to do politics, we want you to guide us, we want to do law, we want you to guide us. So it tells you that the optics matter.
Right.
Representation matter. It changes the narrative from young people thinking that they are just good for marriage to saying that we can be at the decision table and make decisions. I still don't understand why men will make decisions about how the breast should be handled when they don't have breast and they can't tell. And of course, we are celebrating October, Pink October. So I also use this opportunity to encourage many, many women to get their breast screened because the earlier is detected, the better. And I keep saying this, I'll say this. Don't let just any man examine your breast. Go to a certified health professional. I think our brothers are taking the opportunity of the Pink October.
And electing themselves to be medical doctors.
Yes, so
well,
I think that is very important. When it's detected early, we can prevent it. And that brings me to one of the great interventions of President Mahama, the Mahama Care, so that people who unfortunately have suffered from the breast cancer and other diseases can be supported with the Mahama Care. And I think that it's a great initiative we should all support. And that should be it. So we can go into the major discussion on Galamsey. I know your media house has been doing a lot on Galamsey, so we are happy and I'm happy to talk about it.
Well, of course, I always have a love letter for the president. I'm certain that by now he has synopsis of that letter, but we'll get into that now. I want to explain to my little nephew what it really means to be a presidential staffer. I think that over the years, I've heard that title a lot. One of the things I wanted to do, because I know that you're a legal consultant, that's very celebrated, well manufactured. But I've always wondered, when they say a presidential staffer, shall I take the meaning as it is, presidential staffer, just a staff of the president?
Yes, that's what.
Do we have a specific role that each and every person can play over there?
Yes. So, for instance, I work directly with the secretary to the president. I'm the head of the secretariat. And so I'm the staff of the president. And you work for the president. And some people are staffers, but they are at the Minister of Communications office. Some people are staffers, but they are at the Chief of Staff office. But altogether, everybody is working for the president. So it's just like you have a presenter, a producer, their designation, but ultimately you're all staff of multimedia. So I think that's it. There isn't anything so big about it.
Well, yeah. I recall that one of the days I had an interview with Mustafa Bandi, and then I thought to describe him as presidential staffer, and he said that, well, I'm not a presidential staffer.
Yeah, perhaps because he had a specific designation.
Okay,
so maybe
that's
he would prefer that you call him by his title.
Okay.
Than that.
Okay. You sit right at the center of governance. Communicating for a governing party, and when you're as well in the position, which one is difficult?
I don't think any is difficult. I think that the ultimate goal of communication is to bring to fore many issues that many people may not have the time to, perhaps. You see all the documents in front of me. Many people will not have all the time to read all these. So we attempt to read them and we come and summarize it.
Okay.
I think normally people would say that it is more difficult when you are communicating for government, but I'm just proud to be communicating for the NDC government because there is a certain trajectory of a government that is conscious of doing the right thing, that is welcoming of dissenting opinion, and that views dissenting opinion as feedback. And so it's more welcome. I keep telling my NPP friends that they struggled with communication in power, and they are struggling in opposition as well. And so it is not necessarily whether you're in power or not. It's about what your government is doing and how you put that point across. Because if your government is not doing anything, there is nothing we expect the NPP communicators to be saying then, because you can only say what is being done. So I don't think there is any difference. If you ask me, I don't think there is any difference. Okay. Maybe in power, the burden is higher. So you don't just tell, but you demonstrate exactly what you're doing. So it's not enough to say, this will have to be done. You have to demonstrate what you're doing. But I don't have a difficulty with any at all.
Earlier this year, Global Info Analytics did quite the recent survey on the performance of the president, the governance in general, and they thought to compare his performance in September of that recent quarter to the early ones. And there seemed to be a little bit of drop. That survey suggested that there seemed to be some drop. It goes further to seem to put numerical or numbers to what Imani did on the polls. What they did was a sampled views on social media. What I think the Global Info Analytics did was to put data to that belief that the Imani Africa jewelers were brought up. Where you sit, because you're sitting just in the middle, in the center of it, and if you are not communicating as a party person, how would you rate the performance of the government?
No, I'm a very honest communicator. In fact, the president I work for is one president who is more tolerant to dissenting opinion. And in NDC, it's very evident. You don't need to toe a party line if you have a different. So if I have a different opinion, I'm happy to share it. But it is natural that when people have high expectations and sometimes you come to power, they are a bit impatient. And so they expect that. So if you go behind the data, you realize that a number of people want NPP appointees jailed because of the oral. In our judicial system, you can't achieve that in 10 months. And so when you ask them to rate, they probably will give 80. But in October 2024, they may rate President Mahama maybe 95. So it's natural. And for us, that is a very useful feedback. We don't think that ratings are just to satisfy the egos of government. We think that they are very useful feedback to ask what is it that people think that we are not doing right, what it is that we can do better. And yesterday, even for some of the people like Professor Asari, we call him Kweku Azar.
Yes.
You know, he's been on the neck of oral. When the charges were filed in the National Service Authority's case, he says that oral is oral. And so these sentiments are genuine. They are useful feedback. And MFA, while I say that, it's important we make the point that we are enjoying and experiencing a very refreshing governance. And as I sit here, I don't know of any multimedia journalist that has to fly to South Africa because you are on an anti-Galamsey campaign. All your journalists are here. In the past, Manasseh Azuri practically had to even resign and be moving from one hotel to the other. I mean, he was practically...
Manasseh returned before the current government came.
That's what I'm saying. So we are enjoying a very refreshing atmosphere.
What I actually mean is that even when the NPP was still in power, he still returned home.
Yeah, he returned after what pressure? He returned after what pressure? Today, it's so... I mean, anytime I'm watching different media houses, I'm so excited, I'm so elated, because that's what democracy is about. The ability for people to give dissenting opinion, the ability for people to say that we think we rated you 97%, but we think now maybe you are at 80 or we are at 60. The government quickens, we go back and they say, okay, we are happy with this. We think this can be done better. And President Mahama himself has been saying it. In fact, the last time he met the CSOs, he told them, do not quench the fire. Keep the fire coming, keep the pressure coming, so that you keep us as a government on our toes. So for us, these ratings, if you ask me, are a reflection of what the people feel. And it's a very useful feedback for us in government to say that, why do they feel this way? What can we do better?
While I acknowledge that there's some progress as of yesterday in the NSA scandal, what do you say to people like Domelevo, who especially carries a very crucial role? He's the board chair for IOCO, correct me if I'm wrong, who says says that really the progress with oral, he's not quite enthused, he's not quite amused. I like to think that he already knows the judicial system already, and even the NDC as well acknowledges how the judicial system is. Would you say that the promises you made during opposition or when you were campaigning about how you're going to be, what you're going to use the oral for, would you say that the promises were quite inflated, they're quite ballooned?
No, I wouldn't say that. You see, we got so pressured in this country in the last 8 years that somehow we've forgotten how democracy ought to be. We got used to an NPP standard that says that you cannot express a dissenting opinion, or you cannot even say what you believe ought to be because government will be offended. That is not how democracy is practiced. In very advanced jurisdiction, you have leading members of party calling government out. Why? Because both the party and government want the good for themselves. Mr. Domelevo has criticized government. He says that he doesn't even know what is happening. He thinks things are being slowed down. He has also come back to say that after engaging the Attorney General, he thinks that he understands what is happening, and even his earlier quote was misunderstood. Nobody will victimize him or sack him like he saw in the case of Professor Stephen Adey. No.
I'd have thought that what he meant by his earlier quote was misunderstood was in relation to the CJ removal and the processes.
No, it was in relation
specifically for the Attorney General.
This. But the important point has to be that as a country and as a people, we ought to come to a very comfortable point where disagreement does not mean disapproval. Merely because a party member, a government appointee disagrees, because you know how cabinet meetings are held? Mm-hmm. When a policy is brought to bear, everybody's perspective is taken on board. Some people disagree. Some people say, we don't think this policy is sound enough or timely at the time you're looking at implementing them. Doesn't mean that those ministers are disapproving of government. No, it shows that in building a nation, we need to have a big heart to welcome all dissenting opinion. Yes, we know that when it comes to partisan issue, the NPP in some cases can be unreasonable. Sometimes there is really no basis to criticize. But I believe that the Ghanaian people are discerning. To be able to decipher between the people who intended well and they want or they mean well for the country, and people who just want to criticize for criticizing's sake. So I think that let's forget about what happened in the last 8 years. Let's forget about the kind of governance
people who forget their past will not make progress.
No, when I say we should forget, not that we are forgetting our past, but let's not make it look like that is the standard, that in building a nation, in building a democracy, we cannot disagree to agree. In fact, it is in our collective interest, and that is where I say that the NDC and the NPP are not the same, because you must have a political party that there is an internal disagreement on how best to build a nation, so that in making a decision, for that matter, a policy decision, you will know that I may face opposition if I don't tighten all the loose ends. Then we are building a nation. Otherwise, you know what we'll be doing? We'll be telling leaders that we are all sycophants. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter how bad you're doing it. We don't want to talk. So we must encourage not just Malevo, but a number of people who have been consistent. I, for instance, in the fight of Galamsey, commended the Catholic bishops. Why? They have been very consistent. They spoke in the past, they are speaking now. That is a consistent group in our quest to build our nation. We can't just say that nobody, I mean, the NDC does not claim to be a repository of all knowledge. We need to build the nation for the people, with the people. And so we need to listen to these dissenting opinions. And I'm very excited that all these are happening under an NDC government, and especially under the presidency of President John Mahama. And I hope that in the future, every government will take this path.
Because you've introduced Galamsey, maybe we'll get into it. It's quite an elephant in everybody's room, not just this particular room, right?
Yeah.
And so on a scale of, say, I'm not a numbers person, but people say 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, how would you rate the fight against illegal mining in Ghana currently?
You see, an attempt to rate a fight like illegal mining, it's an attempt not to recognize the enormity of the challenge. Because if I tell you it's 5 over 10, it's 7 over 10, by which standard, by which KPI, by which water bodies, by which data? I think that the discussion should not be about rating. I think the discussion should be about the efforts and whether these efforts are intended to yield a certain outcome.
In my years of going to school from nursery to, say, secondary school, each time I took my score sheet, you see that the teacher will mark if it is 4 over 10 before they'll put the remarks, good efforts.
You know why? You know why? Because when you start school, the end of the school is the examination. And so by the time you're writing the examination, you are being scored because you've come to the end of that syllabus.
We put the continuous assessments to be able to get the total score.
And that is why even after the... So I would opt for the continuous assessment thing.
There's figure to it. There's numbers to it.
Yes, there may be numbers to it.
But
I think that it will be a very simplistic analysis. I could just sit here and give you a figure. And trust me, I'll defend whatever figure I give you.
Do you know why I ask? I ask because I've always wondered, do you think that the NDC as a party, the promises you made in the fight against illegal money, because you have just said that the problem is enormous, it's quite deeper. Do you think that you should have been at least measured in the promises on how you'd fight illegal mining? Or you still say that it's 9 months?
In fact, if we had our own way, we must enhance the promises. Because at the time of even making those promises, we may not have come to the knowledge of even how bad it was. And so even with now, we must enhance the promise. MFA, we are talking about a government that inherited a phenomenon of Galamsey at a time when from 2023 to 7 January 2025, the NPP government had made no efforts howsoever to fight the menace of Galamsey. And you know the research I did? I went on to Joy News from your X pages and Facebook from 2023 through to January. And I wanted to see whether when the NPP left the fight and they withdrew Operation Galamsey, Vanguard, and all those other things they were doing, whether Joy FM even puts pressure. What I found were reportages for want of a better expression, of organizations like the Catholic Bishop, the TUC and everything, I did not see a sustained fight then. And so even the media at a point, including your own media, gave up on the government. At a time, we all said that the fight had been lost. And we made the argument that the only time we can fight Galamsey is when there is a change of government. Why do we say that? I have with me here the Professor Frimpong Boaten's report, where people who were at Jubilee have been mentioned. He just did not say that there were people at the presidency. He actually went further to say that these names were engaged in Galamsey. Remember, he was a sector minister and he was also the chairman of the interministerial committee to fight Galamsey then. We had party chairmen, we had party executives, both national and regional, in NPP, engaged in Galamsey, not just Galamsey, but in Forest Reserve area. Between 2023 till now, the NPP government did nothing. The media gave up, rightly so, because I remember your sister station, City FM, championed it just like you have started, and nothing came out of it. So we are talking about a government.
I think the fight against illegal mining with Joy News has been quite consistent.
Yes, yeah, you've been quite consistent, but at a point, rightly so, you give up. I mean, and
I don't see that
anybody will give up. But I'm happy. No, I'm really happy you are back now, because you know why?
Because I don't think we ever give up.
You know, I'm happy you are back now. You know why? Because when I buy food and you buy food, there is no difference between the fact that I'm a staffer and you are a presenter.
Absolutely not.
We eat the same food. So if I sit at the presidency and I want to come and defend Galamsey, even the president is at risk. Every one of us is at risk. So the NDC's approach is not to deny the existence of Galamsey, because there is no government appointee, as I speak to you, that is engaged in Galamsey. President Mahama has done something that is remarkable, saying that no government appointee should be engaged in Galamsey. I mean, in legal mining. And I want to stress this point. No government appointee ought to even be engaged in legal mining.
What about those? I don't have records of those who are existing already. Will you revoke the licenses of those as well?
No, bring your appointment letter and go and do the business of mining. Because look at me. I work directly with the secretary to the president. I am on the same floor with the president. Can you imagine that I'm engaged in Galamsey? How would the district police commander?
That is illegal. What about licensed one?
You, as a government appointee, with the fight we are facing, you have no business. If you want to engage in legal small-scale mining, surrender your position.
What's the balance between a government appointee who is not allowed to do mining plus somebody who is in the ruling party who is also engaged in mining?
So
what's the balance?
If you're in a ruling party, I don't know of any who is currently in the ruling party, or I mean at the national level. But if you are...
Joanna Kujo, who is a member of the NDC, that's last week. Yes. Yeah, that is so far legal.
Yes.
But so my question
she has been doing, but she's not a government appointee.
That's why my question is that if you're not a government appointee, but you belong to the governing party, where do we draw the line, the balance?
We draw the line when it is legal and illegal. First of all, political party association should not be an immunity to when you do wrong. We like doing that in this country, where people do wrong, they don't want to be held accountable, and the moment they are arrested, they say, oh, I'm NDC, I'm NPP. Then you see the political parties. I think that period is past. I think that one of the clearest examples we have is that when the president received a briefing that mentioned Yamin and Abanga as national executives of the NDC who are alleged to have been engaged in illegal mining, quickly referred them to, and I'm told they always go and report. That demonstrates a commitment of a government. So because I cannot tell the scope, and as we are struggling to even define whether it's legal or illegal, we can't tell the scope of what a government appointee would do. So these are some of the fetters we put in place.
What are we doing with the Professor Frimpong Boaten's report?
Yes, we've referred it. We are going behind it so a docket can be prepared on it. And it takes some time, but surely it will come. But MFA, the point also has to be made that to demonstrate this government's commitment to fighting Galamsey at a time when we came to meet no fight against Galamsey is to show that 9 red zone forest areas have been reclaimed. That, I think, is a feather in the cap. I don't think that is exclusive and exhaustive.
Break it down for me. Reclaimed as in?
I mean repossessed.
Okay.
9 forest reserves have been repossessed. The NPP gave up those forest reserves and said that they were no-go areas. And so they could not do anything about those forest reserves. And I will find them for you. The first one is Jimira and Jimira Extension, Afua Hills, Tano Anya, Offenso Shelter Best, Anyaso East, Anyaso South, Subri, Asenayo, and Desiree. I don't come from these communities. So
I'm sure you'd be pardoned and forgiven.
Yes. And
so for these places that you have just mentioned, if anybody wanted to do a private, confirmation of it, if they went there, how would that look?
No, I would
currently for a repossession. How does it look?
It means that currently, as we speak, there is no Galamsey activity going on in these forest areas. And for me, that is a plus because the previous government says that we couldn't do anything about it. And these were red zone areas.
Is that what they said?
Yes.
They said they couldn't do anything about it.
They were red zone areas.
These particular areas?
Yes. They were red zone areas. Guards of the Forestry Commission could not go there. Nobody. There was no intention. And for Tano area, that was where Akunta mining was engaged in illegal mining. The government never went there. In fact, President Anado is on record to have cleared Akunta mining from illegal mining. So I think that when the government does 9, we ought to say that you've done 9. Maybe we want 40. And then government is encouraged. We should not deliberately fall into the NPP narrative that seeks to create the impression that nothing is being done. Something is being done. We recognize that we have to do more. And so to do more, and although we must not necessarily play the blame game, sometimes it is important to ask, how did we get here? Because if the NPP did not give up the fight, if they had ended it somewhere, it would have been a baton and they would have handed over to us. But they left the fight for a certain reason. Because NPP members, you remember Party Hiasika?
Yes.
Because the NPP members Hiasika... I
just don't remember the context in which it was used.
It was in respect of the Professor Frimpong Boateng's report when they were discussing it on how certain things should be done. In the quest of the NPP to engage in Galamsey, and I say this, in fact, one of the things the NPP says is that be in opposition. You politicize the fight. But because you are in government now, you are saying we should not politicize the fight. Why? That is not the reason. At the time we were all adding our voices to the call to end Galamsey, the greatest beneficiaries of the Galamsey were political appointees, presidential staffers, and other people connected to the then NPP government. Today, as I speak to you, there is no government appointee, whether at the presidency or at the ministry or at any agency, who is engaged in Galamsey. So you cannot politicize such a fight.
I mean, because in the earlier submission, when you were talking about President Mahama, giving us hope that a woman could become president very soon, you use optics, and I came along with you. And so it will be a word we may have to play around with on this table this morning. I mean, of course, when it comes to the fight against illegal mining, I think everybody watching us now would appreciate that it is quite a tough fight, especially because of the way it is nuanced. Talking of optics, I hear that, yes, you're planning to repeal the LI. But many people on this table have said that the optics, really, you promised to repeal that LI. I hear a counter-argument, but who actually even created that law in the first place? So some people do not have the moral right to want to say that it should be repealed. We ask these questions because we have seen certain bills raised in Parliament under certificate of urgency, just for the optics of it. How do you feel about the LI not being repealed till now?
So I believe that the LI should have been repealed by now. But let me show you why it was not repealed. And it would be repealed when Parliament resumes sometime this month. When you read Regulation 3 of the LI, Regulation 3, Sub-Regulation 1, says that a person shall not issue a license or permit to any person to undertake mining activity, including exploration activity in the following areas. It goes on to mention the first one is a globally significant biodiversity area, among others. So generally, the rule is that you ought not to grant license or permit for people to mine in certain areas, including forest reserve. Then there is a caveat in Sub-Regulation 2, that despite paragraph A of Sub-Regulation 1, the President may, subject to Article 286 of the Constitution, give approval in writing to a mining company to undertake mining activity in a globally significant biodiversity area in the national interest, emphasis mine. What it does is that it tells you that although you have been given the powers as a president to grant mining leases for people to mine in forest, it must only be done sparingly in the national interest. The question we should be asking was when Nana-Addo was granting the leases and the permits to the likes of Wuntumi, what was the national interest? So when President Mahama came, we realized that this Sub-Regulation 3 was really the problem, because that was the enabling regulation that gave people the impunity to actually go into the forest. So let's take that Regulation 3 there, because when you take the Regulation 3, we think we shouldn't have the problem. And I am the president. And I'm saying that take away my powers to be able to grant licenses or permits for people to mine in the forest.
What will it be replaced with?
So this was replaced, taken away, and was replaced with LI 2501. Civil society said that we think that even if the law was well intended, the way they have been applied, again, against the background of your own promise, we think it should be repealed in its entirety. As a listening government, we felt that this was the challenge. And then they said, no, we think you should repeal it. We are back to repealing it. That is very instructive.
Because I've seen many legal brains like yourself brainstorming a lot at the time when you're coming up with your campaign, I do not think that the details of this regulation was out of sight. I think that you saw it clearly and you understood it, which is why you knew that, well, you can trust the president to want to apply it very well in the interest. In fact, nearly everything in this country is supposed to be in the interest of us, with the president holding it in trust for us, right? But really, the question is, you may have looked at the details of this regulation and you definitely agree that if you took a part of it, if you made it partial or not, you still probably will get the result. But you saw it, you know, and you have been in power before. And you know the role of politics in when you make a promise. So why did you not just, first thing, repeal it?
That promise will be fulfilled. It's not as if that promise will not be fulfilled, but this is why. This is what Nana-Addo was misusing and was granting licenses to people to mine in forest area. In fact, if you read the Fourth Estate report, it tells you that from June 2022, when this LI came to being, especially on the back of Regulation 3, many people started applying for licenses to mine in the forest. And while I make this point, let me also make the point that, do you know there is no law that bars the president from not appointing his children, wife, mother, and all others into any positions?
I'd not be surprised, because they're citizens. Why not?
Yes, but we don't expect the president to do that. You know why? Because they are not in tandem with moral and ethical, maybe not moral, but ethical principles of governance. And so we don't even expect you to do that. And presidents all over have refrained from doing that for a specific purpose. And so merely because a law gives the president the power to do something, where that thing had the potential to degrade the environment, it is not the reasonable expectation of citizens that that will be done. So we said, okay, this was there. We didn't expect the NPP government to use it this way. So if they are actually hiding under the entire LI to say that this entire LI gives the president the right to grant permits and so they were just granting the permit, then the LI ought to be repealed.
You appreciate trust and time, right?
I appreciate
You appreciate trust and time.
I appreciate that.
And so while this will be repealed and then we'll be happy about it, civil society and many individuals who are calling for the repeal, have you measured the impact of it in the general optics of the government?
I think the general impact will be its effects on illegal mining. I think every action and inaction of this government is not merely for the optics. It's not merely for communication line. It ought to be something that you pilot for the greater good and for a certain measurable impact, rather than saying that a communication guideline, I did this in 5 days, than to say that, okay, we don't want to leave a lacuna. The moment you repeal the LI, it means that there may be no there may be no stopgap measure. So we don't want to leave a lacuna. Let's take this, which is a problem, away. Civil society said, no, we hear that argument. It may be sound, but we want to hold you by your promise. There is absolutely nothing wrong to say that. I hear you back. I'll go back to do that. What we are teaching, and by this narrative, telling many governments is that when you say something, it doesn't matter the effects, do it. And that is why the NPP government really messed up, because they were not interested in the impact and the effect. They were interested in just the statement of we have done it. And I can give you one example. When it came to the issue of Galamsey, they said they had done community mining, and that community mining ought to have helped the people in the community, and they gave it a very nice name. Do you know what happened? The areas which they designated as being the areas to benefit from the community mining, the people engaged in the community mining were not from the community. All they needed to tell you was that we have started community mining. The NDC takes a different approach. We believe that it's important to control the narrative.
The responsible cooperative mining, is that what is replacing this one?
Yes. And when we came into office, MFI, you'll be shocked to know that there was no single policy guideline on how they intended to implement the community mining. There was no policy. It's as if somebody slept and said, hey, I think this is a good communication line. Let's do it. Let's give licenses.
What differences were the
I'm happy you asked this question. This ComsDep, what it did was that it went into the communities. And in engaging the communities, we realized that the people live in mining communities. They cannot merely see workers going to work in Newmont, in Shrano mines, in Asanko, and all these mining big firms. They see the lifestyle of the workers, and you say they shouldn't mine. And successive governments have not really engaged them. Like I gave you the example of the failure of the community mining. They just give it the name. They go and bring financiers from other communities. So the NDC says that we must learn a lesson from some of these interventions that never worked. And so together with the communities, this is what the NDC government is now going to do, and it has started. That for every community, 15 people who are living in the community must form a cooperative. So no one individual can go and incorporate a company and say that they are engaged in community mining. 15 people must come together, form a cooperative, and you know what government is doing. Government has engaged the likes of Newmont and other huge mining companies who have concessions and have very major mineral deposits, but they are not in the commercial quantities that those big companies want. And then together regulate these communities to mine in these designated mining areas under the supervision of government.
This sounds all nice and cool.
It is very interesting.
With the policy backing it, do you not agree that implementing it will take a bit of time, and yet we still have the challenge of illegal mining happening until then, until all these policy takes shape and form?
The challenge we ought to avoid, and what we ought not to encourage, is to encourage government to bring stopgap measures, 3 months, 2 months, for the niceties of it, and then it fails, and then we are back to the discussion. Even if it will take time, the question we should be asking is that after the policy is rolled out, even if it is after a year, which the minister and Frank Asari tells me it will not be up, but assuming without admitting that I have to play the devil's advocate and even give them a year, would it not be better to get these people off where they are illegally and push them into a responsible way of mining so that we have a more sustainable ways of dealing with it? Because you see, the issue with Galamsey is that some governments come, they do something, they get tired, they stop, and the people go back. And like I'm telling you, from 2023, the NPP government gave up because they felt they've done everything. We don't want to give up.
I asked a question because you just said you and I still eat. We are eating kontomire.
Yeah.
Right? And so the interim, very existential. Look behind us.
And the interim, I want to refer to Erastus' own Facebook post. As at 9th October, this is Erastus Asaridonko. And I'm saying Erastus because
I mean, of course, he's the authority.
Yeah, he's the authority. I like that. He's the authority. 9th October, NIMO storms Cape 3 Point, arrests several Galamseyers, destroys mining equipment and drugs, gives us images. NIMO's arrests Chinese illegal miners. He gives us images. 7th October, Ayiko NIMO's. These are short-term, medium to long-term interventions. As I speak to you, government has declared water bodies and forest reserve as security zones. They are no-go areas. We want to see our water bodies return to normal. I remember when
a lawyer explained this better. This demarcation by government and the call for emergency, state of emergency, what's the clear difference?
So the clear difference is that the state of emergency does not necessarily end illegal mining. Because you see, I was shocked to even notice that by a data from the Ghana Chamber of Mines, that the year in which NPP banned illegal mining and even legal mining and said we have declared a state of emergency, do you know that our gold exports went up? Where from the gold? The year that we banned both legal and illegal mining and said that a state of emergency was important, and Major Mahama and many people, Major Mahama lost their lives, many people, it was a mess. Gold went up. So you see that if you were to look at actions of government and the data, it does not necessarily support what it is. The NDC government, we have learned our lessons. We intend to make a very good case of how a government ought to fight Galamsey. We intend to demonstrate to the people of Ghana that President Mahama and the presidency of Ghana are not beneficiaries of the illegal mining. They are no people directly connected. And so, state of emergency is only a declaration if without mere enforcement, nothing happens.
Are we making any progress in finding the financiers, the kingpigs? And I ask this
we are.
Every day when
we actually are making progress. In fact, we are. One person is in court today, Chairman to me, Akonta Mine.
I mean, currently as well, you just gave me a report quite recently, Naimus, we've seen the numbers increasing. And every day, if you take about, I can attempt to say that if you take about 100 young people who are engaged in Galamsey, you'd find 100 people as well going back to that same site, even though that same site, another place. And so people have said that let's target the kingpins, the financiers. Of course, I've seen that you have increased the budgets for feeding in prisons from one CB80 pesos to 5 Ghana cedis.
Yes.
So the more we take these young people in there, you're not burdening yourself financially.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point to make. But you see, because I'm a lawyer, I know how we do and incorporate companies and a lot of things and hide the real owners until the veil is lifted. And for the veil to be lifted, normally in court, that would amount to circumstantial evidence. And so we look at this and we look at that and we come to, the law is that you must come to one irresistible conclusion. It is not enough that you are coming to a certain conclusion. the conclusion must be irresistible, that if every reasonable mind saw the same set of facts, they will come to the same conclusion. So it is not so easy getting the financiers. So what does government have to do? They have to mount surveillance. And in mounting surveillance, you don't need to put in public exactly what you are doing because they will outwit the system. What I can say is that I want the people of Ghana to keep faith with President Mahama's government. I want the people of Ghana to appreciate that this is a man that has banned appointees from Galamsey. We never saw it in the past. This is a man that has reclaimed 9 forests. We never saw it in the past. This is a man that admits, you know, MFI, you know why the Galamsey is a big issue. And although multimedia is engaged in a campaign, you didn't originate that campaign. This was a government that by itself organized Meet the Press. The government was not compelled to. We organized Meet the Press, and as part of the discussion, this was tabled. You think we didn't know? I mean, we've also been in the game for long.
Which part? You lost me completely.
I'm talking about the fact that Galamsey is topical today. It's not because somebody took the initiative.
I think you should take time as well to look at the latter part of last year when
No. As for that one, I agree.
As
for the latter part from October,
we respond to what's happening.
October, but I'm saying that in the last 1 month or maybe 6 weeks, this has become a topical issue because these are fallouts from the Meet the Press, and there is absolutely nothing wrong.
These are very visible. You didn't have to meet the press for us to see the visible impact.
Yes, but
of
I'm
illegal
saying,
mining.
Oh, there are a lot of issues in this country, but you are doing well by championing it. But I'm saying that these are fallouts. Some have taken Galamsey, some have taken national health insurance, some have taken this. So I'm trying to tell you that this is not a government that is running away from the challenges.
Let's talk about the city.
Let's talk about the city.
I'm
happy to talk about the city.
Yeah, because
but don't ask me anything on BOG.
Because you're in and around the Bank of Ghana, so why would I not talk about
No, because I'm a board member, I'm not allowed to.
Don't worry, I won't ask you about.
Yeah, but
I won't ask you anything that will put you in trouble if you're smelling any trouble. But how well, I mean, of course, Bloomberg will be one of our favorite places to reference, right?
Yeah.
Because earlier this year, they rated the CD as the world's performing currency, which was quite a good one. This same Bloomberg says that, well, the CD seemed to have depreciated slightly. What are the challenges?
I think that in economics, if you have an economic system that is not running on what we call the fixed income, then you should be striving for what we call relative stability. And relative stability means that you don't expect the cedi to be at, let's say, 12 cedis for 24 months, but we expect it to be 12 cedi, maybe this week, 12.1, 12.2, 12.5. We are just hovering around that area because the forces of demand and supply actually determines the value of the cedi. But we ought to also say that we need to commend this government. Sometimes I feel...
You talked about demand and supply.
Yes.
One of the major factors would be the imports that's causing the pressure on the cedi.
The imports. But from where I sit, I think that sometimes I feel we don't commend President Mahama enough because every time there is no resting period for him. It doesn't matter.
So he understands what a president
So but if it was
there'll be no mollycoddles.
If it was that easy, many other presidents would have done it. So actually, if you understand our economic system, and that's one thing Dr. Baumia used to say, that the fundamentals of our economic system would not ordinarily allow a government to bring a currency down.
It's interesting that you're advancing this argument but for you, you'd have other people say that it's because of what we're doing, it's because of what the government is doing.
That's what I'm saying.
But I'm just learning as well that it is the relative stability. It's just the nature of a currency.
No, I'm saying that, MFI, I'm saying that if you look at the fundamentals of our economy, ordinarily, it should not be easy for a currency to actually appreciate against the dollar. But if you have a currency appreciating from 17 cedis to 12.1, as I yesterday when I checked, that is big. And what both the central bank and the Ministry of Finance are looking at is what we call the relative stability. Not to have one fixed exchange rate, but within the forces and the market, businesses should be able to plan.
There were no interventions that existed that made the ground very fertile for the cedi to see its appreciation in the early years, in the early months of this year.
Would it even matter if there were interventions? Because if there were interventions, what it will mean is that governments could have done something about it in the past and they refused to do something. I think what the NDC government appreciated was that businesses were collapsing.
What do you say to people who say that what the Bank of Ghana is doing with the currency is artificial because you're pumping forex into the system? What do you say? Have you heard that argument?
I've heard that argument.
What do you say to them?
I don't know what they mean by artificial. Because
unsustainable? Maybe I should use another word. Unsustainable.
You see, it is easier. It's very easy to posit economic theories. And I've been having this argument with my economic lecturers. I know
and
one
unfortunately,
person,
my time is up.
Oh,
I know.
but let me conclude.
You can wrap on that,
but let me conclude and say that the NDC government is on track. The NDC government is committed to making Ghana better than we came to meet it. The macroeconomic indicators like inflation, the exchange rate, and many others demonstrate our commitment.
Put a note in your diary. We'll pick up on the cedi conversation next.
I'll come back.
Okay?
I certainly will come back.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Beatrice Annan, legal consultant. She sometimes models her way through the BOG, Bank of Ghana. She doesn't like to talk about it, but as well a presidential staffer, and I've been getting clarity to exactly what she does at the presidency. But thank you so much for making time to speak to us.
I'm honored to be here.
There's more on the show. Please stay.